Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening. Welcome to The View Up Here. I am your host, Canadian Glenn, and it is April 3rd, 2019. Lusai. Tonight, the UCP Time Machine. A 1992 platform in 2019 equals strong and free, apparently. Everything old is still old, unless you are Jason Kenney. And it's brand new, and somehow it'll work, despite never working before. Trickle-down economics, right out of the Randian Book of Failure. Thatcher's big society offloading. ALEC-inspired labor exploitation endorsed by anti-union forces. More Harper-style law and order that will end up in court on constitutional grounds. Again, attacks on rights for students at all levels, from elimination of Bill 24 protections for LGBTQ2+ youth, the threats of post-secondary funding dependent on allowing far-right propaganda on campus without protest. That doesn't even touch the proposed war room to defend last century's industry, the threatened unwinnable challenges on the federal government that'll do nothing but cost money, and the multiple promises that maintaining current funding is not a funding cut, despite 15,000 new students in Alberta entering the school system every year, despite the aging population needing increased access to health care, despite population growth. Maintaining current funding is not a funding cut. Okay then. As multinational oil and gas companies get out of the oil sands to prevent stranded assets, they need more subsidies and gifts, apparently. And there is no need to end coal-fired electricity generation, according to the UCP visionaries. If you think repealing the Alberta carbon levy regime is going to prevent or change anything, like the federal carbon tax being imposed, then you're Jason Kenney's kind of voter. But then that plays into the poor Alberta false reality. But it'll be Albertans who pay, and not the corporations increasing profit margins. But hey, P3s will be back, big time. They still don't save any money and cost much more in the long run, but this is a campaign for the literal survival of Alberta. Just ask these guys being investigated by the RCMP for illegal donations and vote rigging. Now, as if what's going on in Ontario isn't a mess big enough, or a big enough warning for Alberta, this election is going to go down to the wire. Now, just an update from today. The lawsuit to delay the Office of the Elections Commissioner investigation of the kamikaze campaign of Jeff Callaway, that injunction was denied today in court. Bring it on. We got 13 days until the election. That's an eternity with this kind of shit flying around. And of course, tomorrow night is the Super Bowl, the one and only Alberta Leaders Debate, which will have Rachel Notley, Jason Kenney, Stephen Mandel, David Kahn. That's all. But tonight, a specific look at the UCP platform. I'm actually surprised that they put out a full platform. I thought for sure we were going to get the Doug Ford treatment. There would be no platform. But it's out. Oh, and it's a doozy. I'm going to try and cover as much as I can what I think is important. I have counterpoints, shall we say, inserted along the way. This is indeed a very partisan document. It's by no means a research paper on how they're going to spend your money. The campaign document is called Alberta Strong and Free, whatever that means. They don't ever explain it. It has 5 top commitments. Number 1, a job creation plan. Number 2, repeal the carbon tax. Number 3, stand up for Alberta. Number 4, get our fiscal house in order. And then all the way down at number 5, it's like, oh shit, we forgot. We got to put this on there. Protect quality health care and education. Glad it could come in somewhere. Getting Alberta back to work. Alberta has a proud tradition of a free enterprise economy with opportunities for all. The evidence is clear that competitive tax rates, private property rights, and sensible regulation create growth and jobs. The UCP plan to get Albertans back to work includes the commitments. Now, Bill 1, the Carbon Tax Repeal Act, scraps the NDP's $1.4 billion tax on everything, creates 6,000 jobs, and allows Alberta families and job creators to keep more of their own money. How you eliminate a tax and it creates jobs. I need a little help on that. Anyway, the job creation tax cut will lower the tax burden on employers from 12% to 8%, creating 55,000 jobs and growing our economy by $12.7 billion. We started hearing this in the 1980s. It hasn't changed. It still hasn't happened this way. Bill 2, the Open for Business Act. No Ford influence here at all, which gives Alberta's workers more freedom, restores their right to a secret ballot, and brings back balance to Alberta's labor laws to get job creators investing in Alberta again. So let's get this straight. The reason why people aren't creating jobs in Alberta is because of the labor laws. That's what's keeping them out of the economy. Yeah. Okay. Workers more freedom, as we will see as we go through this document. What that means is the UCP would love to give you the right to work, which is the race to the bottom. Gab Incorporated. Restores the right to a secret ballot. That involves union certification. Restoring that right would once again make Alberta the last province in the entire country to still do that. With the changes to the labor law that the Democratic government brought in, we stepped up to where the other 9 provinces are. But apparently that's unacceptable to the UCP. So we're going to restore the right to go back in time. The Red Tape Reduction Action Plan will cut red tape by 1/3 to reduce costs and speed up approvals, freeing job creators to get more Albertans back to work. Again, reality economics are if you have demand, if your market is expanding, you hire people. That's how it works. Do you want the money or not? If you're going to sit there and say, oh, the government's oppressive, fuck it, I'm not going to go get that money, then you shouldn't be in business. I digress. The Farm Freedom and Safety Act, which will repeal and replace Bill 6. We will listen to farmers, ranchers, and agricultural workers that the NDP ignored to let our farmers grow again. Now, for the reality history on Bill 6, again, what it did is bring Alberta up to the minimum of the other 9 provinces in Canada and gave WCB workplace protection to farm operations. It doesn't include family farms, and I think there's a limit of you must have more than 3 hired people. When the bill came out, yes, the farmers were pissed off. They did not like it. What did the NDP do? They went into consultations and they changed it. And they went back and they said, is this better? Then they changed it some more and they went back and said, is this better? And the farmers said, yes, that we can live with. So to paint the picture that this is such an affront to democracy is a flat-out lie. But we are talking about the UCP. Building public infrastructure to support services like healthcare and education. Not to support healthcare and education, to support services like healthcare and education. An energy policy that will re-energize oil and gas by speeding up approvals, cutting red tape, unblocking natural gas shipments, and supporting LNG exports. To where? There are no markets. Oh, right. We're not supposed to talk about that. Okay. Speeding up approvals. There's been absolutely no delay in approvals from the Alberta Environment Ministry for anything. Even though it's those evil socialists, there is nothing they have not approved or held up at the provincial level. So when Kenney says he's going to speed up approvals, well, maybe he could have done that if he would have kept his ass in Ottawa. But now, nah, bullshit. Implement the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Fund, the TIER Fund, to achieve real greenhouse gas emission reductions while encouraging investment across industries. This is a step back in time to what existed from the Prentice government before Rachel Notley. This is basically what Scheer mumbles about once in a while. This is a levy on heavy emitters. That's it. And there are a lot of regulations. It's not just the price on carbon. There's credits. There's this. It's like every other big industry subsidy bill that we don't want to call a subsidy. So this is a step back in time. And it costs more. We'll get into that about how Kenney represents the carbon tax and what it really is. But carrying on. An electricity plan that ensures Alberta's electricity market is affordable for consumers and job creators and produces market-driven green energy. Well, the NDP has drastically improved prices of power, especially for residential consumers. There was very early in their term of government, a lot of private power suppliers had an option to return their contracts and leave. And some did. And the reason for that is because they only were left with one golden egg, not two golden eggs. Fair enough. See around. It's not like they're still not making money. They're just not making too much money. But, according to the UCP, that's not market-driven enough. This always confounds me. These assholes talk about market economics. Consumers are the fucking market. Let us set it. Don't tell us what it is. Sorry, getting off topic. Job creation in Alberta's tourism sector will come from a stable and predictable funding formula for Travel Alberta that links its funding and performance to tourism industry outcomes as a whole. This is turning into a P3 for tourism, is their idea. Standing up for forestry jobs will ensure that the sustainable sector can thrive rather than struggle under proposed federal and provincial restrictions. So the goal is to deregulate. The goal is to interfere in the National Caribou Protection Plan that is being developed. As we get a little further into this platform, half the problems of forestry is because they were allowed to overharvest for so long. Now their lands are being, either used up, or where they want to go, they can't go because things have changed. The standing up for forestry jobs, Notley had a big part of her platform is directly aimed at the forestry industry, and they've gotten a lot of money from the Alberta government in the last 4 years. And they're not complaining. But, fucking socialists. Again, federal restrictions. What are you going to do about that, Kenny? The Alberta Advantage immigration plan will attract newcomers who will start business, invest, and create jobs. So we want the whitest, most Christian people with money. They are always welcome. A smarter approach to innovation will make Alberta a magnet for investment in new technologies, including artificial intelligence, health sciences, geothermal energy, and information technology. In other words, subsidies. Now, that's their plan. That's what they're going to do to get Alberta back to work. Strong and free. Bill 1, the Carbon Tax Repeal Act. Okay, this is their words. Keep that in mind. The NDP introduced the largest tax increase in Alberta history without campaigning on it. The job-killing carbon tax takes in $1.4 billion each year, making it more expensive to hire employees, move goods around the province, and heat homes. And the current carbon tax is just the start. The NDP plans to increase their cash grab at least 67% to $2.5 billion, in step with Prime Minister Trudeau. A united Conservative government will scrap the carbon tax, leaving that money in the pockets of families, businesses, and nonprofits while creating 6,000 new jobs by 2024. Okay. Again, this is, just keep saying the lie. Doesn't matter if somebody comes up with proof. It is very prominently displayed in the NDP platform from 2015 that they would be moving forward with measures, economic and regulatory, to control greenhouse gas emissions. And that's what a carbon tax is. Now, this 67% in step with, the only thing it's in step with is now there is a federal program that can collect and administer for Alberta. A little bit separate from the CRA, because the Canada Revenue Agency was doing it for the Alberta Climate Levy anyway, just like they do all the time. But now there is a federal provision. So I guess that's what Kenney means by in step with the Prime Minister. I have no idea. Now, a United Conservative government will introduce Bill 1, the Carbon Tax Repeal Act, which will subject any future carbon tax to the Alberta Taxpayer Protection Act, which requires all sales taxes to be voted on in a referendum. Well, first of all, if you ask me, if you ask a lot of economists, a carbon tax is not a sales tax, it is a consumption tax. Bill 1 will also release detailed assessments, not statistics, assessments of the impact of the carbon tax and the NDP's climate leadership plan on Alberta's economy and on key sectors, including electricity, oil and gas, and homes. They will share an impact report with Albertans on the costs of adopting Justin Trudeau and the NDP's plan for a $50 a ton carbon tax. Of course, they will only talk about the money going out. They won't talk about rebates. They won't talk about reductions in greenhouse gas. They only want to talk about what you pay. Doesn't matter if you get back more than you paid. We don't mention that. They will also challenge the constitutionality of the not federal carbon tax, the Trudeau carbon tax, by filing a judicial reference to the Court of Appeal, while continuing to support similar challenges by the governments of Saskatchewan and Ontario. So he's not going to join their lawsuit. He's going to start a whole nother one. Everybody remembers how much money the Harper government blew defending its unconstitutional laws with tax money. I remind you that the current record for the Harper government before the Supreme Court is, I believe, 3-45. Or it could be 3-42. Still, no. And it cost an estimated $450 million plus for all those losing lawsuits in that decade. So this is the road Kenney wants to get on. Now, scrapping the carbon tax will help Albertans pay their bills. Based on budget 2018 estimates, at $50,000 in income, a single Albertan will save $286. A single Albertan with one child will save $346. A single Albertan with two children will save $405. And a single Albertan with three or more children will save $524. Notice they have absolutely no mention of the rebate regime, because every one of these scenarios under the NDP plan are eligible for 100% rebate. And the people at the very bottom will actually get more back than they paid. So this is ridiculous. Using data compiled by economists Trevor Tombe and Jennifer Winter at the University of Calgary, we calculate that 725,000 Alberta families will receive tax cuts ranging from $25 to $1,150 under our proposal. That's hard to shift into the other language, because right now with the NDP plan, there is a full carbon tax rebate guaranteed up to $95,000 family income. I don't see anything wrong with that. I actually see $95,000 as being a little high. And of course, if you are lower, then you will be getting back more than you paid in. But, they don't want to talk about that. Now, here's the logic behind this, how eliminating a tax creates jobs. Create 6,000 jobs. One Slave Lake sawmill pays nearly $500,000 in carbon taxes every year, not including extra carbon tax costs for log hauling. That equates $10,000, $50,000 jobs that could be created. Estimates that scrapping the NDP carbon tax will create 6,000 jobs across the province. Because, of course, as we know, according to trickle-down theory-nomics, all this money that management and ownership are saving immediately goes into hiring more employees. Oh, yeah, we know that's true. The average small and medium-sized business in Alberta consumes an estimated 1,500 gigajoules of natural gas per year, which equates to $2,276 per year in gross carbon taxes for natural gas. Okay, there's a couple qualifiers in that just right there. The average small and medium-sized business in Alberta consumes an estimated 32,689 liters of gasoline and diesel per year. That's $2,200 per year in gross carbon taxes for gasoline and diesel. Now, the reason they put that gross word in there is because there are numerous exemptions already. Farmers have numerous exemptions. Diesel for farm equipment, purple gas, no carbon tax. So, what are you talking about? They don't qualify. They don't take them out of their estimation. So, of course, they're insisting together. These work out to almost $4,500 annually in carbon tax costs. Well, if there was no rebates, yeah. But that's not how it is. If there were no regulations to give allowance and make certain things carbon tax exempt, yeah, but that's not the reality. The job creation tax cut. Again, I'll read the preface from the propaganda department. Alberta has led Canada in jobs, incomes, and growth in recent decades, in part because we had the lowest business taxes. This advantage attracted hundreds of companies, including Canadian Pacific and Imperial Oil. Really? I thought Canadian Pacific was actually in Alberta before it was Alberta. Imperial Oil has been here since Leduc number 1, 1947. Is this another Harper claim lineage back to the fucking beginning of the universe? By raising the business tax rate to 12%, the NDP has given us higher business tax rates than Ontario and Quebec and eliminated our advantage over our neighboring provinces, BC and Saskatchewan. While the NDP is making us less competitive, the world is changing. The United States has cut taxes, creating the incentive for Canadian companies to shift operations south. Oh no, be afraid. Government revenues also declined when the NDP increased taxes. Corporate tax revenues will bring in $4.1 billion this year compared to $5.8 billion when the rate was 10%. The verdict is clear. Higher business tax rates kill jobs and reduce government revenue. Well, by all means, let's cut the taxes then. That's sure to help revenue. Reversing this trend won't happen overnight, but steadily dropping our business rate down to 8%, combined with other measures like red tape reductions, will command the attention of job creators across Canada and beyond. Yes, well beyond. A UCP government will enact a job creation tax cut to reduce the general income tax rate on businesses from 12% to 8% over 4 years. Keep small business tax rates at 2%, which the NDP cut, but he doesn't seem to mention anywhere. Further improve Alberta's tax competitiveness once the budget is balanced. So, yeah, never, whatever. This is pure trickle-down bullshit. A job creation tax cut. So if you give this tax cut to large companies and they don't hire more people, are you going to take the money back? Oh, now here we go now. Here's how it works. See if you've heard this bullshit before. According to an analysis by leading economist Dr. Jack Mintz, the job creation tax cut will lead to the creation of at least 55,000 full-time private sector jobs. Right, Jack. University of Calgary political scientist Dr. Bev Dolby estimates that this tax cut will generate a $12.7 billion increase in nominal GDP, a 6.5% increase in per capita real GDP, and $1.2 billion in additional government revenues by 2023-24. Okay, so you're telling me that this is a political scientist and we're taking her advice on economics. Okay. In their platform, of course, they have little things printed in it to show you how everybody's on board. And they have little quotes about what a great plan this is. They have quoted Franco Terrazzano, who is the current Canadian Taxpayers Federation president or something. Michael Kelly-Gagnon, the president and CEO of the Montreal Economic Institute. Terence Corcoran from the Financial Post. Oh, yeah, like what a surprise. These people are all for it. Outstanding. But as far as that goes, there was an article out today in the Tyee by Will McMartin that goes through the story of BC's decade and a half experience with the BC Liberals going on this trickle-down scheme, which has resulted in the hole that BC is in now, created a systemic deficit, and it hasn't increased revenues at all over time. This job creation shit just doesn't exist. It does not exist. I'm just taking a quick look through it to see if there's anything I can quote out of this article to make it, really, really hit. It is a detailed story, and, it makes its case very clearly. Trickle down is bullshit. It doesn't work. Bill 2, the Open for Business Act. Under the NDP, Alberta just isn't working. We need urgent action to get Albertans back to work. That is why a UCP government will enact policies that relentlessly focus on creating jobs and prosperity. The Open for Business Act will restore workplace democracy and bring back balance to labor legislation. We will also retain some recent NDP changes, which have clarified worker rights and provided for greater compassionate leave. Now, we get to something that has really come up lately. Wages. A UCP government will retain the general $15 an hour minimum wage. But they will introduce a youth job creation wage of $13 an hour for workers who are 17 years of age or younger to encourage job creators to hire young Albertans for their first job. Appoint a minimum wage expert panel to analyze and publish all of the available economic data on the labor market impact of the NDP's, get this, 50% increase in the minimum wage. This is what it says. So what? Before the NDP, the minimum wage in Alberta was $7.50? Assess whether hospitality industry workers who serve alcohol would likely generate higher net incomes, example, by working more hours with a wage differential similar to those that exist in Ontario, Quebec, and BC. What kind of bullshit is this? Well, you serve alcohol, you get tips, and so you're paid less. But you can work more hours. So you can still make more. Isn't this great? Fucking bullshit. Return to a regular, irregular workday distinction for calculating holiday pay. That's a way of getting out of paying people more than straight time. And if it's a regular day off, they're going to push to not pay you. Return to allowing banked hours to be paid out at regular pay instead of time and a half. This has become an issue. And we'll get to it. Now, workplace democracy and balance in labor legislation. A UCP government will restore the mandatory secret ballot for union certification votes. Don't they make it sound like they're doing something revolutionary and cutting edge? It's taking Alberta back in time. As I said earlier, it would make Alberta once again the only province in Canada that still operates on post-war rules. Protect workers from being forced to fund political parties and causes without explicit opt-in approval. This is a rallying cry that's gone on for some time in the free rider movement. Every once in a while, somebody blows their horn about, I didn't pay my union dues for it to be on a billboard. Well, no, not specifically. You vote for leadership of your union. So you did. So shut up. Don't like it? Go to the meetings. Get involved. But, it's much easier to tell couch potatoes that they're being lied to. Reverse the replacement worker ban in the public sector. So, in other words, scabs are allowed. Again. Require the Labor Relations Board to provide legal support to all union workers in order to better understand and exercise their rights. This is a way to get the Labor Relations Board inside the union grievance procedure, which they have no business being there. My question is, are they going to make the LRB sit in on... Excuse me, hang on. Are they going to make the LRB sit in on the merit disciplinary hearings for their employers? Are they going to sit in on the CLAC internal discipline hearings? Or they just want to get inside the unions? Strengthen new provisions in the Labor Relations Code that have reduced the duplication of employment claims in multiple forms. So what they want to do is not treat every complaint as a separate complaint. They want to put them into groups, which means lowest common denominator, which means one decision rules them all, which means fuck you. If that's not bad enough, I mean, this is to get Albertans back to work because nobody's working, remember. We're going to take our certification back to the 50s. We're going to beat the drum about free riders, and it doesn't exist. We're going to, basically, if we get into a strike situation with public unions, we'll just hire scabs. We're going to get the Labor Relations Board to sit in where they don't belong because we can say they can. And yeah, that time and a half thing, yeah, no, maybe not. But wait, there's more. A united Conservative government will also retain some of the new procedural powers given to the Labor Relations Board, employment standards, and labor arbitrators, such as marshalling powers that allow the focusing of complaints. There we go. New procedures relating to the duty of fair representation. The current essential services legislation, and they're going to retain new forms of leave adopted in recent NDP legislation. The personal and family responsibility leave, long-term illness and injury leave, bereavement leave, domestic violence leave, citizenship ceremony leave would be a new unpaid leave that provides up to a half day of job protection for employees attending a citizenship ceremony. So let's get the frame of mind correct here. These guys are so right-wing economic dickheads that they think it's necessary to make a line in the law that says you can get half a day off to become a citizen of Canada, and we won't fire you. Wow. How impressive. Critical illness of an adult family member leave, critical illness of a child, or death or disappearance of a child. And of course, it says a UCP government will bring balance back to Alberta's labor laws, restore workplace democracy, and incentivize the creation of youth employment. Talk about lipstick on a bag of shit. Balance is going back in time. Restoring democracy is overruling progress. And incentivizing youth employment is paying them less. Strong and free. From April 1st, Edmonton Journal. Emma Graney. Hang on, I got to take a drink. UCP promise of banked overtime pay cut draws criticism from labor experts. Labor experts dispute the claim by UCP leader Jason Kenney that his party's promise to stop workers being paid time and a half for their banked overtime does not amount to a cut in overtime pay. Further, Kenney's repeated insistence that the change would simply align Alberta with overtime laws in every other province is not true. In every province or territory where workers can bank overtime, employers are required to pay out those hours at 1.5 times the hourly wage. In British Columbia, it goes up to double time for anything exceeding 12 hours of OT. This does not affect overtime pay. I repeat, it does not affect or diminish overtime pay, Kenney said on Monday when asked about the line in the UCP platform, which he unveiled over last weekend in Calgary. Kenney argued that his promise to cut overtime payouts for banked hours would simply bring back rules that were in place for decades. But University of Saskatchewan political scientist Charles Smith told Post Media that is the crux of the issue. Until recently, Alberta had the worst employment standards and worst union rules in all of Canada. Mr. Smith said the UCP overtime policy would see Alberta move back towards an old model that never worked that well for workers to begin with, because it would give employers a way to defer wage costs. Now, Alberta introduced a 1.5 time overtime system on January 1st, 2018. Now, when the new employment standards were announced in March 2017, Labour Minister Christina Gray said they hadn't been overhauled in nearly 30 years, and Alberta had fallen behind the rest of Canada. Kenney dismissed the question about whether employers might force workers to bank overtime to avoid paying them out in cash, saying, "I never heard any complaints about the previous law." But a senior economist with the national branch of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Angela McEwen, said Kenney's policy is a head-scratcher. It would absolutely be a pay cut. I'm really surprised about this election promise, given how many tradespeople are having a rough time right now. To tell them that you're taking away their overtime pay, that's shocking to me. I don't think he talked to enough people who would be affected by this. Kenney said that the policy was developed at the behest of hospitality workers who worried a lack of overtime would reduce their income from tips during busy times of year like Christmas. So again, it's back to this, well, you can work more hours, so, you can make more. Fuck your hourly rate. We'll cut it. We'll let you work more. That's great. There you go. You're ahead now. But the policy would affect a broad swath of workers, from trades to healthcare, basically anyone without a contract that specifically lays out overtime rules. Now, I saw Kenney say this on Twitter, too. It was the hospitality industry, the restaurant lobby, that asked for this. I asked Mr. Kenney, was it the employees of the hospitality industry who were discovered being kept in the basement of the Burger King in Lethbridge? Is that who you talked to who's so in favor of this? Oh, yeah, by the way, that happened on temporary foreign worker laws that guess who created? Jason Kenney. The Red Tape Reduction Action Plan. Red tape is a costly and growing burden on Alberta businesses, and it kills jobs. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business, another fiercely reliable organization, says red tape costs $6,744 per employee. Yeah. So do they define what red tape is? No. The CFIB also gave Alberta the only F in the provincial red tape report card. Explains why the Alberta Chamber of Commerce recently said that mounting costs being layered on business by changes to government regulation and policy is the single greatest challenge to business competitiveness and shared prosperity. I'm curious on their definition of shared prosperity. Regardless, a UCP government will pass the Red Tape Reduction Act to cut the regulatory burden and the time required for regulatory decisions to be made. Appoint a Minister for Red Tape Reduction to lead the action plan and meet the 1/3 reduction target. Like, what is this bullshit action plan? Harper, Minister for Red Tape, Mike Harris. Like, come up with something new, man. form industry panels to help the minister identify unnecessary red tape in every sector of Alberta's economy. So now you know exactly why he's getting so much money from the restaurant lobby, from the car dealers, from Big Ag. It's easy to see. Implement a one-in, one-out rule requiring ministries to identify at least one offsetting regulation for every new regulation created. This is Ralph Klein bullshit. How the hell are you supposed to do that? In other words, don't change anything. Let us pick out the third we're going to wipe out and shut up and take it. Or else. Just like Ford. Just like Harris. Create a red tape challenge website. And they even have their domain. StopRedTape.ca. Yeah, sounds like a rebel media site. To replicate the United Kingdom's successful red tape challenge by crowdsourcing input from businesses, organizations, and the public. Yeah, I guess the public too. On which regulations should be improved, kept, or scrapped. What bullshit. Cut red tape within government to allow the public sector to focus on serving Albertans. Oh boy. The Farm Freedom Act. And they even got the balls to put a subtitle under this. Renewing opportunities for Alberta's agricultural entrepreneurs. Alberta's agriculture industry helped to build our province, and under a UCP government, it will be a key part of a prosperous economic future. Our farmers and ranchers are going through tough times. The carbon tax, higher WCB premiums, new labor regulations, power prices, and market access failures are threatening the sustainability of these multi-generational farms and ranches. Since the NDP came into office, employment in Alberta's agriculture sector has fallen by 19%. That's 11,300 jobs that no longer exist. Of course, there's absolutely no mention here of the effect of Big Ag in those job elimination numbers. Processing employs far more people than actual production. United Conservatives understand how vital this sector is to Alberta's economy and food supply. We also understand that keeping these farms and ranches sustainable is vital to the fabric of Alberta's history and culture. A UCP government will immediately launch comprehensive consultations with farmers, ranchers, agricultural workers, and others on how best to balance the unique economic pressures of farming with the need for a common-sense, flexible farm safety regime. The goal of these consultations will be to develop recommendations for the introduction of the Farm Freedom and Safety Act, the FFSA, which will be passed into law in 2019. This will repeal Bill 6, which the official title was the 2015 Enhanced Protection for Farm and Ranch Workers Act. The FFSA will require employers to maintain workplace insurance for farm workers, but allow employers to choose whether to purchase insurance from the market or from the WCB, as long as basic standards of coverage are met for such things as medical and return-to-work support services and protection against loss of income. Privatize. Exempt small farms from employment legislation, following the example of New Brunswick that exempts farms that employ 3 or fewer employees over a substantial period of the year, not including family members. Well, that's pretty much what we got now. ensure basic safety standards. What exactly does that mean? And that's basically the whole reason of the law that's in place now, to increase and to enforce compliance for health and safety on the farm. Recognize that operating a farm is unlike operating a conventional business, and that farmers and ranchers require much greater flexibility in meeting employment standards. Why? Oh, because they vote for you. Oh, okay. And of course, minimize the red tape burden on farmers and ranchers. Strengthen property rights by pursuing the constitutional entrenchment of property rights and adopting an Alberta Property Rights Protection Act. Well, that's a long-time right-wing reform libertarian bullshit dream. You're going to pursue a constitutional entrenchment of property rights. Yeah, good luck. Not happening. Fight for market access and reduce interprovincial trade barriers. Yeah, we've been hearing that shit for 40 years. Streamline the Agriculture Financial Services Corporation to improve services and responsiveness to farmers. Eliminate the carbon tax and reduce the corporate tax and reduce the red tape burden. Well, I mean, are these generational farms that you want to protect, or are they corporations? You're alluding to both. Back against a tax on agriculture by well-funded special interests. In many ways, these resemble the campaign of vilification targeting Alberta's energy industry in recent years. Yeah, in other words, the government is going to spend public money to put out misinformation on GMOs, on glyphosates, but hey, free market, oh yeah. Ensure that farmers, not governments, set key agriculture research priorities. In other words, we're going to let Bayer tell us what they want us to spend our money on. Perform a comprehensive review of risk mitigation programs. I'm sure this would include the pine beetle, but it would also include GMO migration, and it should have something to do with glyphosates as well. Consult on land sales in order to replace good agricultural land lost to urban expansion by cooperating with municipalities seeking auctions on parcels of Crown land for agricultural use where appropriate. Such disposition of Crown land would be subject to consultation with First Nations communities and others. So in other words, it's, as usual, just sell more Crown land. We don't really care. We'll work it out. Just sell it. Building public infrastructure. Alberta needs to plan and build infrastructure to meet the needs of our future population and grow the economy. Alberta has led the country in transportation infrastructure investment in recent decades, and this has helped every sector in our economy grow. Well, I don't know about recent decades. I don't remember much of fuck all getting built when Klein was around. The NDP have failed to deliver predictable funding or a transparent list of infrastructure priorities and have let ideology get in the way of making efficient use of common sense financing options like public-private partnerships, P3s. They let ideology get in the way and they quit using P3s because P3s end up costing anywhere from 200 to 700% of public ownership. Yeah, that's ideology. Yeah, how dare they? UCP will focus on infrastructure investments that support key public services like health and education. and our economy, like roads. The UCP government will maintain the existing Government of Alberta capital plan for 2019-20 through 2022-23. So they're not changing that at all. They will pass the Alberta Infrastructure Act that will provide transparency on prioritization criteria, establish predictable funding levels, and ensure adequate maintenance of existing assets. Define adequate. Use alternative financing. For example, P3s, design build, construction management, etc., for procurement of capital projects when there is a solid business case and value for money can be achieved for taxpayers. Well, then it should be fucking never. End of story. Limit the use of cost-plus contracts for procurement of capital projects. Well, that's a misnomer. Now, first of all, this thing about cost-plus, you know when this happens almost all the time? On design build. Because engineering is not done. And we'll design it as we go. That always works out so good. P3s are infamous for this. They want the money. We'll get around to figuring out how it goes together. Oh, shit. We screwed this up. Do you think you could cover this? Oh, yeah, no problem. Grease, 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 stroke, stroke. Prepare and publicly release an annual Government of Alberta Infrastructure Report as part of the province's annual report to provide detailed information to Albertans on the progress made in meeting the various commitments in the 5-year capital plan. What that is let's hide the P3s. Prepare and publicly release a 20-year strategic capital plan for Alberta. Yeah, well, whatever. Doesn't matter. Just painting a picture. It's just a narrative. Now we get into the stuff that's really important. Letting our energy sector get back to work. Alberta's energy sector is truly a remarkable success story. It is a global leader in environmental standards, labor standards, and technological innovation. Unlike the NDP, which has shown their underlying opposition to the development of our resources, a UCP government will proudly stand up for our 151,000 energy workers. We have a clear plan to get our energy sector creating jobs again by improving the regulation of energy, revitalizing our natural gas sector, and creating a framework to reclaim abandoned wells in Alberta. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that the NDP has an underlying opposition to the development of resources by spending $3.7 billion on rail tankers, by having competitions and subsidies to build value-added refining facilities, to, investing hundreds of millions of dollars in alternative energy. Yeah, they've got an underlying opposition to it. Absolutely. You fucking clown. The Alberta Energy Regulator should ensure that energy development occurs in an efficient and environmentally responsible manner. We must preserve Alberta's reputation as a world leader in developing resources responsibly. But we must also restore our reputation with investors as a leader in predictable and efficient regulation. There's been no change in regulation for over 2 years. The problem is the resource here sucks. Admit it. Under the NDP, the performance of the Alberta Energy Regulator has declined despite hiring more staff. Here's a real neutral source. The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, CAP, now estimates that getting wells approved in Alberta can take up to twice as long as in Saskatchewan and 4 times longer than in Texas. It is no surprise that our U.S. competitors are enjoying an oil boom while our industry languishes. Oh no! A UCP government will, within 180 days, create a review of the AER to identify efficiencies in both the budget and regulations of the AER. So just like Harper did with the National Energy Board, they will sit in cabinet and decide what regulations go, what they look at, what they don't, what you have to produce, what you don't. They're going to decide. Look how well it's worked out for the National Energy Board. Establish clear benchmarks for approval times and maintain a public dashboard of the AER's key performance metrics. I can see it now. What did we approve today? Click here. Streamline and expedite the AER's review processes to bring greater certainty and stability to our investment climate. To bring greater certainty, you mean rig it, you mean guarantee it. Now, of course, people should know that 95% of timeline delays in the approval process are on the proponent. It's the people looking to get the approval are the ones who slow it down. It's not the public. It's not interveners. It's the proponents. So when you start limiting timelines, you're limiting their responsibility. You're making it easier for them. If they drag their ass and they, well, we're out of time, we'll move on to the next thing. Does that bother them at all? Revitalizing Alberta's natural gas industry. Canada is the 4th largest natural gas producer in the world, and more than half of that comes from Alberta. Tens of thousands of Albertans work in natural gas, and many more work in related industries, like our petrochemical sector. Western Canada now has a large resource base in the Deep Basin and Montney areas of Western Alberta and Northeast BC. The lack of pipeline access is forcing natural gas producers to sell their product at a massive discount. In 2018, American producers sold for roughly $3 a gigajoule, while Alberta's spot price averaged just under $1. We are practically giving away this valuable resource that belongs to all Albertans. A UCP government will implement a robust natural gas strategy so that our producers can create jobs for Albertans. Of course, they don't mention the amount of sulfur in a lot of the gas in Alberta, which of course lowers the price. A UCP government will increase regulatory efficiency and streamline project approvals to increase the pace of activity. There it is. We're not concerned with compliance. We just want more, faster. We'll work with the producers, the National Energy Board. I like how they refer to the National Energy Board because it'll be gone. And TransCanada to evaluate changes to regulations and policies pertaining to the natural gas TransCanada line system, including tolls and tariffs, and interconnection to the TransCanada pipeline system through the export points in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. In other words, a subsidy. Work with producers, TCPL, and regulators to increase throughput, reduce price volatility, and lower shipper tolls on major national natural gas pipeline systems. Okay, so TransCanada owns the pipe network. They run it. They collect tolls. You want to lower the tolls. You think TransCanada is just going to say, yeah, okay, we'll take less revenue. That's no problem, man. No, guess who's going to make up the difference? The taxpayer. Subsidy. There are a large number of suspended or inactive oil and gas wells and associated facilities in Alberta that have reached the end of their economic lives. Yeah, large number. Yeah, like over 70,000. Under the current climate of reduced oil and natural gas prices, this inventory of suspended wells and facilities has grown substantially. Duh. A UCP government will streamline the process for well and facility abandonment and environmental reclamation to reduce costs and increase the rate at which wells that will not be used again are officially abandoned. Work jointly with the AER and industry to overhaul the liability management framework in Alberta, ensuring liabilities are covered without unduly discouraging new investment. Okay, now, there's something you have to understand about this. It wasn't that long ago that there were reports that came out that said that the fund that is supposed to be, funding is from producers. And it is for abandonment and environmental reclamation. They've basically been paying nothing into it for 30 years. There's, how much money is in there, but the liabilities are expected to be up to 200 times what's in the fund. So when they say work jointly with AER and industry to overhaul the liability management framework, ensuring liabilities are covered, that means they're going to change what qualifies. All of a sudden, a vast majority of these abandoned wells are no longer going to be considered a problem. That's how you lower the liability. You just say it doesn't qualify anymore. Does it get fixed? Nope. But it's off the books, and that's what we're all about. Propose that the federal government provide tax incentives and financial support, such as green flow-through shares, for the abandonment and environmental reclamation of oil and gas wells and associated surface facilities. So that's an admission that there's so little money when so much is needed. We're going to go to Ottawa and ask them to subsidize us. Although they're the root of all our evil and we hate them, we're going to ask them for money. Urge the federal government to establish alternative financial vehicles that focus on environmental reclamation in the oil and gas industry, such as adapting qualifying environmental trusts to include well decommissioning costs. Tell you what this means, y'all. They want to make derivatives out of dead wells. That sounds like it's on the up and up, eh? The Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Fund, TIER. Basically, this is going back. We need a sensible approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. However, the NDP's Carbon Competitiveness Incentive Regulation, the CCIR, has become just another cash cow for government, according to an internal government analysis. The costs associated with the CCIR are estimated to be approximately $1.3 billion a year and are anticipated to result in greater employment loss than estimated impacts associated with the coal phase-out. Yeah, I don't see how you can argue with that. It's not their fault. That's what happens. The CCIR has also introduced significant uncertainty into the marketplace, which has hurt Alberta's economy. In 2007, Alberta became the first jurisdiction in North America to bring in a form of carbon pricing for emitters. And the UCP believe that restoring an updated version of this model will produce better results than the CCIR. We can reassure investors while generating real emissions reductions by implementing an improved system for larger emitters. Now, what that program did is basically just allow the big players to be the only ones in the room. They're the only ones involved with this program, and they were allowed to buy credits wherever they could find them and pay for them, and then they didn't have to reduce their emissions because they brought somebody else's good work. Some people may have heard me on the show before talk about a wind farm that I helped build down southeast of Tabor, Alberta, owned by Suncor Energy. 100% of the power generated hit the transmission lines and went to California. They control the direction and pitch of the windmills. From there, the reason Suncor built this, not only to make money off the power, for the credits. So they didn't have to put in scrubbers, etc., north of Fort McMurray. So they spent money for a profitable sideline and got credits to not pollute as much. That sounds like a real good system you want to bring back. Under this new system, existing facilities with emissions above 100,000 tons of carbon dioxide or equivalent, other than electricity generators, will have to meet an emissions performance target of reducing their emissions intensity by 10%, increasing by 1% per year, compared to their average performance between 2016 and 2018. That can be achieved by either reducing facility emissions, purchasing credits from facilities that have exceeded their compliance targets, purchasing accredited offsets from emissions reductions occurring elsewhere in the economy, or paying into the tier fund at a rate of $20 a ton. That's another thing. $20 a ton is cheaper than the $30 a ton that everybody else in Canada is going on. Require large final emitters in the electricity sector to meet a good as best gas performance standard, which means that over 60% of coal-fired electricity emissions will be okay now. So he's removing the legislation to end coal-fired electricity in Alberta by screwing with the regulations, nothing more. At least TransAlta has already come out and said, we don't care, coal is dead. We're not changing our plans. But who does this kiss the ass of? Maybe ATCO, TransAlta, the Southern family, which just happens to be where Kenney announced this platform. Spruce Meadows, edge of Calgary, south side, owned by the Southern family. The first $100 million in revenues and 50% of the remaining revenues paid into the tier fund will be used for new and cleaner Alberta-based technologies that reduce carbon emissions even further, including new and improved oil sands extraction technology and supporting research and investment in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. The remaining tier funds will also support reductions in Alberta's deficit, and $20 million of the $30 million annual budget for the energy war room that will fight fake news and share the truth about Alberta's resource sector. Holy Christ. So what does this do? It ignores the reality. I believe any type of pricing regime from 2007 doesn't quite cut it in 2019. They get into the bitching about Alberta Power. I'm going to go right by that. I wanted to talk about job creation in Alberta's tourism sector. The UCP support innovative approaches to sustaining funding for tourism promotion and marketing through partnerships with the private sector. A UCP government will direct Travel Alberta to work with tourism stakeholders to develop a new 10-year tourism strategy, recognizing the role that the private sector can play in assisting governments in promoting Alberta as a tourist destination. Reorient the mandate of Travel Alberta towards more active facilitation of private sector funding and P3s for its tourism marketing and promotion activities. Reprofile a portion of existing government funding for tourism into a tourism partnership incentive fund managed through Travel Alberta to attract and identify sources of private sector support for tourism. So basically, come lobby us. We have subsidies. Remove intrusive laws, rules, and regulations which impede the development of Alberta's tourism sector. What in the hell does that mean? What does that involve? Does it involve wildlife laws? Does it involve park laws? What does that involve? Mr. Ford, work with the federal government and airport authorities in Calgary and Edmonton to expand air transport agreements and get more flights to Alberta from tourist source countries. If there were people here to take the flights, they'd be flying here. That's how it works. Quit giving away our money so they come fly here for half-empty planes for 2 years. The money's spent. Yeah, fuck it. We're out of here. Bye. Stupid. And here's the biggest change. Make tourism the responsibility of the Minister of Economic Development and Trade. If that ain't a sign about privatization, I don't know what is. And that, again, that's straight out of Harper's playbook. The way he tried to privatize national parks. Not really going to say anything about the forestry. The Alberta Advantage Immigration Strategy. According to the Conference Board of Canada, some 524,000 new Canadians would earn as much as $12.7 billion more and pay more taxes if their learning credentials were fully recognized. A UCP government will immediately launch consultations to develop the Alberta Advantage Immigration Strategy, which will be completed by the end of 2019. We will seek input from immigrants, employers, settlement organizations, municipalities, policy experts, and will study best practices in other provinces. The goal will be to end large backlogs, speed up processing times, proactively attract talented newcomers from overseas, and welcome job-creating entrepreneurs. And they talk about how they're going to pump up the rural side of that. Here's something that's interesting. Create the International Student Entrepreneur Program, which will encourage foreign student graduates of Alberta post-secondary institutions to start a business and stay in Alberta permanently. Data shows that young foreign student grads with Canadian degrees and strong English language skills are set for success and become major contributors to the economy. So, of course, any foreign students that can afford to come here pay, 3-4 times what a Canadian student pays. So it gives you an idea of the people that, yeah, sure, you can stay. Create the Foreign Graduate Startup Visa Program that will target brilliant foreign grads of top universities in the United States who want to launch a startup enterprise in North America but cannot get immigration status in the U.S. So that's a little bit of pillaging, which is interesting. A creation of a Fairness for Newcomers office with a $2.5 million budget and oversight from the Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Immigration. This office will work with trade and professional licensing bodies to streamline, simplify, and accelerate foreign credential recognition, with the goal of giving applicants giving applicants for licensure a clear answer within 6 months or less of their application. Again, this is all about merit and clack. As far as recognizing credentials that you're presented with, especially in trades, and they come from somewhere else, how do you know if they're legitimate? Well, I can tell you one example of an immigrant from the People's Republic of China who apparently was trained and evaluated at a third-year apprentice level. Those accreditations were accepted reluctantly. He was getting paid as a third year. He had absolutely no knowledge at all about what was going on. He contributed to the injury of 2 co-workers, and I complained about his status. He was put into what we call the test booth, where you are given a list of instructions and raw materials, and as an electrician, you're told to do this. The overall score for the test is 100. This man, who was supposedly a third-year apprentice, got the lowest score they've ever seen before, 7 out of 100. And that's in 3 hours. So to just blanket say, oh, these people need to be approved, get them working, get them working. This guy was a fucking hazard. And he didn't know shit. He ended up being hired as a laborer because that's what he was equipped to do. In time, perhaps, I doubt it with this particular case, but this is what's going on out there. But yet to the UCP, no, hurry up, let's go, let's go, let's go. Let a scab boss hire him. Let's go. Publicly identify and hold accountable those regulatory bodies that have unreasonable barriers to credential recognition. Yeah, specifically unions. Here's a good photo op. Organize a premier summit on fairness for newcomers. Holy shit. A smarter approach to innovation is basically giving away more money. The next major part is making life better for Albertans. The UCP plan to make life better for Albertans includes the following commitments. A patient-centered healthcare system that will use innovative reforms within the Canada Health Act while maintaining or increasing healthcare funding to get Albertans the high-quality care they deserve. Again, this maintaining is not an increase. Let's get that straight. Education will be strengthened by working with parents, teachers, principals, and trustees to protect school choice, improve accountability, and deliver the best possible outcomes for our children. Post-secondary education will be supported as critical, both to Alberta's future economy and a vibrant Alberta. Supported, not funded. The justice system will become fairer, faster, and more effective in protecting the safety of every Albertan. Just make a claim, don't explain it. Okay, Doug. We will protect vulnerable Albertans with legislation and increased funding for Alberta's specialized law enforcement agencies that combat domestic violence, stalkers, child exploitation and abuse, and gang activity and drug trafficking. Gee, where have we heard that before, Harper? Partnering with nonprofits, charities, and volunteers will help create a brighter future for Albertans who need a hand up by assisting the groups best positioned to help Albertans in their communities, otherwise known as Thatcherism, big society offloading. We will make life better for seniors by privatizing. A Heroes Fund and veteran scholarships. Okay, fine, but it's such a niche application, it's more for the PR side. Municipalities will get more autonomy and Municipalities will get more autonomy and predictability while we ensure transparency for voters. Those three words are what Doug Ford used when he started out by fucking over the GTA and their municipal governance. Same words. Arts and culture will grow steadily through facilitated collaboration with philanthropists and private businesses. So we're going to use the arts and culture community to professionalize our message. Our environment will be protected by a common sense conservation plan. We know what that means. As far as the healthcare goes, they make a big deal about how since the NDP were elected, a lot of wait times have increased. This has also been the fastest aging, biggest amount ever on any system anywhere, in Canada right now. Population is aging at a rate we haven't seen before, and in numbers we haven't seen. And the problem is there's simply not enough facilities. Why? Well, maybe because from around 1992 until into the 21st century, nobody built a goddamn thing. And in that time, Alberta's population almost doubled. So this is an infrastructure deficit. Klein, Stelmach, Redford, Prentice. But, there's no mention of that. It's the last 4 years that really screwed everything up. A united Conservative government will maintain or increase health spending and maintain a universally accessible, publicly funded healthcare system. Now, they got some kind of plan to reduce surgical wait times. A lot of it involves what Saskatchewan has done with privatization and private clinics. It's not worked out that great. It's been tried before in Alberta and Calgary. What usually happens is they end up going broke and taking money for services they've never done. Then the public system has to scramble to get all those people in that they thought they didn't have to worry about. Now, a basis that they're using for this is something called the Shawali decision, which was in 2005 by the Supreme Court. And it was done in Quebec. It only legally applies to Quebec. But this is the kind of thing that Kenney wants to work off. And what the Shawali case did, it was a case of a patient and a doctor suing the province of Quebec and the government of Canada on a constitutional grounds that they could not get private health insurance. And I'll give you a little background on it. This is from the Canadian Institute of Actuaries. This is dated on June 9, 2005. The Supreme Court of Canada rendered judgment in the matter of Shawali and Zeliotis against both the province of Quebec and Canada. Shawali and Ziliotis pretended that the prohibition of obtaining private insurance covering hospital and medical services that are covered under the provincial healthcare program of Quebec but are not timely available because of unduly long waiting lists is in contradiction with both the Canadian and the Quebec Charters of Rights and Freedoms. Now, Shaweli and Ziliotis had lost by lower courts and made an appeal to the Supreme Court. The appeal was allowed at a simple majority of 4 versus 3. Now, this case was the first serious challenge to the Canadian public health system, and among other things, addressed the question of whether a province can prevent its residents from using private insurance to pay for services that are normally covered by the provincial Medicare program. Beyond this straightforward question, the Shawali decision has a very special importance because not only does it open the door to private health insurance, but it also surely fuels the debate about the shortcomings of provincial healthcare programs and the role that private insurance can play in an area that has long been considered the exclusive realm of the provincial governments. Now, the attitude of the provinces that are hostile to private delivery of medical care is based on an interpretation of the Canada Health Act, whereby the provinces judge that growth of the private sector would undermine the strength of the public sector and its ability to achieve the objectives of the Canada Health Act, mostly the object of accessibility, by diverting resources from the public sector to the private. Now, that's been the argument all along. Now, let me get to the reality of it. Now, the judgment was given with these guys going against both charters. Now, Section 1 of the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms of Quebec reads that Section 1 is every human being has a right to life, personal security, inviolability, and freedom. Section 9.1 of the Quebec Charter has a notwithstanding clause. The Canadian Charter, Section 1, guarantees, free and democratic society subject only to reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified. Section 7 says everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Now, the notwithstanding clause did figure into this, but the lower courts had always said that this was one of those times where for the public good, for public order and good governance, they agreed that this may infringe on those rights, but the price to be paid for going against that was much greater. Now, it's also interesting that 2 of the judges abstained in this decision, who were from Ontario, which is rather strange, but it was 4-3 to rule in the litigants. The dissenting judges, which included Chief Justice McLaughlin, said that this was a matter of politics, not of constitutionality. The court should not be deciding these things. So for all those right-wing rabble-rousers that say that the bench is creating law, here's a demonstration where the court said, we're not making law. You do it. So this is what they're using as a wedge for privatization. And it's weak. It's really weak. And it applies in Quebec where there's an additional charter. Now, with Kenney talking about a charter for Alberta, imagine if he wrote it a little different, that Shawali could easily be enforced. Something to think about. They talk about spending a lot of money on mental health and addiction. I'm sure it will be through private contracted clinics. We'll have to see if Kenny's brother is involved in any way. Since they think you can pray the gay away, maybe they think you can pray the dope away as well. Again, finding efficiencies in the system. We're going to look at everything, blah, blah, blah. Same old Ford bullshit. The issue is Alberta has the lowest administrative cost for delivering healthcare in Canada, 3.3%. So where you're going to find this money, good luck. Now we get to renewing education. Under the NDP, class sizes in Alberta have continued to increase. Math and reading scores have declined. Alberta's successful tradition of school choice has been under attack. The carbon tax has taken valuable resources away from classrooms. And curriculum changes have been taking place largely in secret. That is just a flat-out fucking lie. It's quite easily proven how much consultation went into the curriculum rewrite that's still being implemented. But of course, you know, it's all communist dogma or some shit. The United Conservatives recognize that every child is unique and that parents, not politicians, know what is best for their children. Well, how about education professionals? Isn't it funny how they leave them out of that little equation there? A UCP government will again maintain or increase education funding. Yeah, blah, blah, red tape, blah, blah, blah. They're going to change the way some subjects are taught. They have a problem with discovery or inquiry learning, also known as constructivism, by repealing a ministerial order from 2013. Who was the government then? And replacing it with a new ministerial order which focuses on teaching essential knowledge to help students develop foundational competencies. They will pause the NDP's curriculum review and broaden consultations to be open and transparent, including a wider range of perspectives from parents, teachers, and subject matter experts like John Carpe, like that clown in Drayton Valley, Devon, who was the education critic and is still on the ballot, that said severely homophobic things. But, you know, it was a few years ago. He's okay now. Yeah, he's good. They're going to basically try and undo everything that has been done to get the system moving forward. Now, they talk about what they're going to do, and there's a lot of mean-nothing statements. Support safe schools. Well, what the fuck does that mean? Reinforce the need for open critical debate. We know what that means. Seen it in the States. Now they talk about what they're going to do. This caused such an uproar about Bill 24 and GSAs. But when you read their platform, proclaim the Education Act 2012, which will take effect on September 1st, 2019. A UCP government will trust the hard work done by those who created the 2012 Education Act and proclaim that legislation, already passed by the Ledge. Well, if the government didn't bring it in after they took the time to pass it, must be a real good law then, eh? Oh, it's only 7 years old now. Oh, for sure. Yeah, sounds good. Unlike the NDP's curriculum review, conducted largely in secret, the Education Act resulted from years of widespread public consultation. Exactly why it wasn't enacted. Oh, God. Introduce a Choice in Education Act, which will affirm parents have primary responsibility for the education of their children. I have no idea what that actually means. Add to the preamble of the Education Act, that 7-year-old thing we're going to put in, the recognition of Section 26.3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. Of course, they don't include anything about the Universal Declaration of Rights of the Child. Protect the status and funding of independent schools in legislation, given that they save the public education system $168 million annually. Again, where they come up with these numbers, private schools and charter schools save money. Okay. Facilitate the creation and operation of new charter schools by lifting the cap on the number of charter schools, lifting charter schools enrollment caps, allowing charter schools to own property, treat charter schools as priorities above other possible uses for surplus public school infrastructure. So, when a public school board has property to divest from and maybe help their own budget situation, public education, no, first priority goes to charter schools. Cut them a deal, because now the province is involved. The Ministry of Education is involved. No, cheaper. No, cheaper. Okay, there you go. This is bullshit. Support and encourage an expansion of alternative programs in the public system. Privatization. Respect the constitutional right to separate schools, which means the Catholic boards aren't going anywhere. And of course, like everywhere else, that discussion has been coming up more and more. It's the status quo backwards. There is not one mention about them taking away GSA outing protections in their platform. Not a single fucking word, like it doesn't exist. Unconscionable. Chicken shit is what it is. Now, supporting and reforming post-secondary education. Reforming. Encourage efforts by Alberta universities and colleges to attract more qualified foreign students. Yeah. Ching, 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 ching. Establish the most effective intellectual property framework for the commercialization and entrepreneurial application of innovative research and development from Alberta's universities and colleges. That means free research and development for corporations. This one makes me laugh. Work with universities and industry associations to measure Alberta's performance against leading global research and government networks in key innovation hubs like California, which means Silicon Valley, Texas, which means the petrochemical industry, Israel, London, and Hong Kong. Oh yeah, compare Alberta to them. Require all universities and colleges to develop, post, and comply with free speech policies that conform to the University of Chicago Statement on the Principles of Free Expression. Well, I just happen to have that here. I'm going to read a little bit from it. Of course, the ideas of different members of the university community will often and quite naturally conflict. But it is not the proper role of the university to attempt to shield individuals from ideas and opinions they find unwelcome, disagreeable, or even deeply offensive. Although the university greatly values civility, and although all members of the university community share in the responsibility for maintaining a climate of mutual respect, concerns about civility and mutual respect can never be used as a justification for closing off discussion of ideas, however offensive or disagreeable those ideas may be to some members of our community. In a word, the university's fundamental commitment is to the principle that debate or deliberation may not be suppressed because the ideas put forth are thought by some or even by most members of the community to be offensive, unwise, immoral, or wrong-headed. It is for the individual members of the university committee, not for the university as an institution, to make these judgments for themselves and to act on those judgments not by seeking to suppress speech, but by openly and vigorously contesting the ideas that they oppose. As a corollary to the university's commitment to protect and promote free expression, members of the university community must also act in conformity with the principle of free expression. Although members of the community are free to criticize and contest the views expressed on campus, and to criticize and contest speakers who are invited to express their views on campus, they may not obstruct or otherwise interfere with the freedom of others to express views they reject or even loathe. To this end, the university has a solemn responsibility not only to promote a lively and fearless freedom of debate and deliberation, but also to protect that freedom when others attempt to restrict it. Of course, what that means is you're not allowed to protest Nazis. You're not allowed to protest Islamophobes, white supremacists, because, you know, free ideas and stuff. I thought universities were a place for forward-looking thinking. Skills for jobs. They got a lot of pump about increasing apprenticeship. They talk about, doubling the number of schools that have the work programs with the trades in high school. They talk about more scholarships for those programs. They talk about supporting the Northern Alberta and Southern Alberta Institute of Technology new collegiate schools with helping build those schools. There's a few things I don't understand. Reform teacher certification to enable qualified tradespeople to teach and bring their skills to the classroom without requiring a full Bachelor of Education degree. Well, I can teach electricity. I don't have a B.Ed. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. Modernize the Alberta Employment Standards Code to enable junior high school students who work in co-op programs on job sites. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The last thing you need on job sites are 13 and 14-year-olds. Absolutely not. Why? Never mind that the work experience kids in high school get paid next to nothing. Imagine what these kids will get. And imagine what they'll be told to do. And how much oversight. And how much background do they have? Ridiculous idea. Child labor. Increase support for Skills Canada Alberta with funding of $2 million over 4 years so that young Albertans can participate in the Skills Canada national competition and demonstrate their skills and talent on the national and world stage. Well, Alberta's been a part of that forever. The national competition was held here in Edmonton 2 or 3 years ago. The problem that the UCP has with this is somebody has to pay for these apprentices to get there. Alberta always does quite well. You know why? Because it's Alberta unions that win all the prizes. Merritt and Clack are too fucking cheap to do it. And plus, they just don't have as good a people. That's all there is to it. So let's give them some government money to get them in there. Subsidy, flat out. The creation of an Alberta Trades Hall of Fame to honor Albertan tradespeople who have left their mark on our province through their work. Oh yeah, I can see every Merritt Alberta president there's ever been. Ridiculous. Create a Premier's Council comprised of vocational education leaders, trades unions, and other stakeholders that meet regularly with the Premier and relevant ministers to advance vocational education as a government priority. Nice photo op. Cracking down on crime. See, I'm just about out of time already. Damn it. I think I'm going to stop it there. There is a lot more. I'll tell you what's happening for next week. Tomorrow and Friday, I will be at the Public Interest Alberta Conference with my digital voice recorder in hand. We'll see who I can get there. I am counting on sitting down with David Klimenhaga of albertapolitics.ca. We'll finally, schedules will match up. I intend to have David for a good portion of the show next week. We'll see what happens. We'll see who else I can get at the at the Public Interest Alberta I'm not even sure what to call it. Conference. That's the word. Conference. Yeah, I'm going to stop it there. I mean, you know, yes, this is only my opinion of this stuff, but Jesus Christ, come on. This is the same old crap. There's nothing in there. All there is in there is new giveaways that we're going to eliminate rules. That's it. Oh, and P3s. We love P3s. Now we're going to take away rights from gay kids, protections from sexual orientation minority, but we're not going to put it in there, but we are. And we're going to take away your time and a half overtime, but, you know, we're not going to say we are. That's the thing. They did say in here, flat out, it says in print, time and a half is now straight time. Tell me how that helps workers. Absolute bullshit. It's getting close. Polling is getting closer all the time. I heard last night, the total last night was 25 bozo eruptions and counting. I believe it's been 7 candidates that have withdrawn. We are now past the deadline. Anybody who gets kicked out now, the UCP will not have anyone on the ballot. That's probably why he didn't kick out the goofball from Drayton Valley, Devon. We'll see what happens. It's getting close. On some polls, the UCP is apparently ahead still by 19%. On other polls, if you use the margin of error, 1 up, 1 down, it's a dead heat. UCP is dead in Edmonton. Calgary is much more of a battleground than I expected it to be, and it's moving towards the NDP more every day. This is by no means over. We'll see what happens. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week for more on the Alberta election. Thank you for listening. Good night from the view up here.